Feel free to ask questions as we go. This isn't by any means. I mean, it's a formal presentation, but it's not a formal presentation. I'm more than happy to answer questions as we go along. And basically, what I wanted to do is talk a bit about URSA and how to get involved in undergraduate research and scholarly activity, and really, it's one of those things you don't have to do while you're here, but it's something that can look really great on your resume and help you build some skills and leadership and all kinds of things that are going to be invaluable for you after you graduated here from UAF. So um, I'll just talk about some of the different aspects and a couple things. So in this overview, what I want to talk about is how do you get started? So you may not have any idea at this point in time like what it takes to get involved in a project, and I want to talk about some aspects related to that. I want to talk about the opportunities that URSA supports. And really, we can help in a number of ways, and I'll talk about those. But one of the biggest things we do is we provide funding, and something that's kind of a pretty invaluable piece to this. But I'll talk about what those different funding opportunities are, and then I want to wrap it up talking about the proposal process, because ultimately, if you're going to receive funding from URSA, you're going to have to submit a proposal for that. And there's some aspects of that I've been doing this now. I've been the director of URSA now since 2016. I was co-director for about a year and a half before that. And there's a number of things I've seen along the way that it would be good to know up front, and that'll kind of help sort of grease the skids and make it a little bit easier as you work your way through it. So this is a bit of background. My name is Trent Sutton. I didn't formally introduce myself, but I'm the director of URSA. Like I said, I've been in this position since 2016. July of 2016, I was the co-director for about a year and a half before that. And then with me is Aaron Kirchner, who is the URSA coordinator, who is pretty new in the position as of the beginning of this month. So, but we're here to help students and do this journey as they're sort of getting involved in undergraduate research and creative activity. And I'll keep using those terms, research and creative activity or research and creative scholarship, because there are some differences between research. Think about it sort of traditional scientific method, hypothesis testing, versus what a student, say, in liberal arts might do. And so since you're in anthropology, you can kind of be in sort of a couple of different worlds, depending on, you might do up a formal research project. It might be something more of a creative activity or a creative scholarship. So any of those are valid in terms of what we would support, and because we're here for all students at UAF. So I'll talk about first, like, how do I get started, or how do you get started as a student in our that might be interested in undergraduate research and creative scholarship. And I tell everybody the same thing. There's two things that you need to be involved in an undergraduate research project or some type of creative activity, and that's an idea and that's a mentor. Idea is something that you're interested in. It can be anything. I'll point this out. I would say the majority of students who are involved in a project that we would support do something related to their major. That makes the most sense. It's something you're highly interested in. You've got some expertise in that area, but don't feel obligated to do that. We've had many students who have been, say, for example, a science major, but they do a liberal arts type project. They might do something down at one of the art studios because they're really interested in it. It's kind of a hobby for them. Likewise, we have students in liberal arts that'll do a science project. So don't feel like you're kind of pigeonholed into your area. Like in your case, because you're interested in anthropology, that might make the most sense because you might have some interest there. But feel free, you can do anything, because we support any discipline on this campus. So you need an idea. Where does an idea come from? It can be anything. It can become an idea that you had, something you're just interested in pursuing that you want to look at or you want to develop. That's one area. It might be something you're sitting in a class with your instructors talking about something, and like it might sort of light bulb sort of moment there, and you decide, oh, that would be kind of a cool thing to pursue, and you develop an idea based on that. It might be something you read. It might be something something from your degree program. It can come from anywhere. But that's the basic thing you have to have, because that's what's going to form the basis of your interest and the project that you're ultimately going to develop. So some kind of an idea. And it's one of those things that if maybe what I've noticed in some students, especially when you're first sort of developing an idea, you don't really know how to kind of sort of hone it along. That's where we can come in to help you. So you could schedule a meeting with me. You can go meet with Aaron. And we'll just sort of bombard you with questions and kind of help you kind of take this maybe sort of big amorphous idea that you have and kind of hone it down to something where a little more specific where you can develop a project on that. That's also where your mentor might come in. They can help you with in this regard. And so a mentor at UAF, it can be anybody any faculty member, it can be a staff member, it can be a postdoc, it can be a graduate student. Only person who can't mentor an undergraduate is another undergraduate. So that's the only stipulation there. But the mentor is someone who's going to help you along with the project you're going to develop. And so they would have some expertise in the area you're working in. And so it might be one of those deals where you might not know who to go to be a potential mentor. And that's where we can come in. If you came to us and said, hey, I'm really interested in a project in anthropology, I don't know who to talk to. I haven't had an anthropology class yet, or I haven't met any of the anthropology instructors yet. Who might be a good person for me to talk to about who to potentially develop? And that's where we ask again some more questions about the type of anthropology project you might be interested in, and then we help line you up. So, for example, the person in this the picture here, this is Elaine Drew. She's an anthropology faculty member. And so she'd be a good person as a first resource potentially to talk to, because she's actually been involved in a lot of undergraduate research projects, mentoring students along the way. And so we'll help, again, the idea is to help make a match, right? Help you, again, hone your project, identify a mentor, make that connection so that we introduce you to the mentor by email or in person or phone or however we do that. And then we turn you loose. And then you work with the mentor to develop that project further, and hopefully something that you can ultimately do for a project. So, like I said, the two things you really need is an idea and a mentor, and we can come in on both of those, and we've done that many times. So as you're, whether it's something you pursue soon or it's a little bit later in your academic career here at UAF, don't hesitate to come see us, and we'll help you along with that part of your journey. I don't know, Aaron, anything you want to add to this before I move on?
Nothing in particular other than really do just reach out. We can help connect you with anybody that you might be interested in. And then later when we get to the application process, we do have samples in the office too that you can check out if you're just like passing up through the hallway and everything. So just keep that in mind.
Yep. Go on. Okay. So getting started. So we're going to make the assumption that you've got an idea and you've got a mentor. A couple other things to keep in mind from an opportunity perspective. From an eligibility, for eligibility, there are a couple things. One, you have to be a degree seeking student. In your case, you're an anthropology student, so you're degree seeking. You need to be enrolled for at least 6 credits the semester before and the semester after that you're completing the project. So, for example, if you're completing a spring semester project, it'd be 6 credits that spring semester. You might not be taking any credits during the summer. But if you're working on a summer project, students typically don't take any credits over the summer. You're taking 6 credits minimum in the spring semester before and 6 credits the fall semester after. And so there's something to keep in mind there. Have a GPA greater than a 2.3. Really, that's kind of the sort of academic warning break point. So if you're struggling in your classes, the last thing we'd want to do is have you working on an undergraduate research or creative scholarship project, because you probably should be spending more time on your courses to make sure you get your GPA up before you fall into sort of a more bigger issue with potentially academic disqualification. Again, I mentioned you need to have a mentor and an idea, which we just sort of talked about. And then the other eligibility criterion to keep in mind is that the number of awards you can receive a year. So we'll talk about some of the different types of awards here in a minute, but we have most of our students get a award called project awards. That's a fall project award, a spring project award, or a summer project award. You can get one of those per academic year. And then we have travel awards as well, which are a little bit different. You can get one of those per academic year as well. And so just something to keep in mind. Again, the idea here is to sort of spread the wealth, to give as many students at UAF an opportunity to get some type of funding in support of their undergraduate research and creative scholarship. If you go to our website, you'll see, and if you just Google UAF URSA, you'll get to our website. You'll see there's a lot of information there, and I would encourage you to take a look at that at your convenience. But for the award schedule, this is the 2022-2023 award schedule, and there's a couple things I wanted to point out here. There's a student travel category, and this is travel for going to a meeting or a conference primarily to give a presentation. And so if you haven't been involved in an undergraduate research project before, it may be a little premature to be thinking about that, but it's something to keep in mind. So if you do complete some type of a project, whether it's URSA supported or not, we are supportive of sending you to a conference or some other type of a venue to give a presentation, or maybe it's an immersion. Depending on the nature of the travel, for individuals, they can receive $2,000 per individual. For a group, so that's two or more, that's $4,000 or up to $4,000. That may or may not be enough to cover the full travel. If it's in-state travel, like somewhere in Alaska, $2,000 or $4,000 for a group is probably adequate in most cases. That may be the case for a national project, so somewhere outside of Alaska, depending on how far away it might be and how many days it would be. So this would cover things like your airfare or ground transportation. It would cover lodging. It would cover per diem. It would cover registration costs as well. So you may need to have an additional source of funding to help cover the difference. And so that's where your individual department might come in, or the college or school that you belong to might come in, or there might be some other means of covering those costs as well. This also can include international travel. We've had a number of students go overseas. Obviously, $2,000 for an individual isn't going to go very far for an international trip. It's, the airfare itself is usually much more than that. But again, that's where lining up additional sources of funding can come in. So this might be something that's, again, maybe not an area that you're going to go after right away, but it's something to keep in mind that you can go for. It's the projects, it's sort of traditional fall, spring, or summer projects where students typically apply for. So we've already awarded the fall project awards. Those started at the beginning of the fall semester, and they'll be wrapped up by the end of the fall semester. But coming up are the spring project awards, and so that'll be complete for completion of the spring semester. That announcement will go out on October 3rd, and so right here, October 3rd. You'll have just over a month to submit the proposals, and then those will be due on November 6th, and then we'll make our decisions on December 2nd. And I'll talk a bit more about that process here shortly. And then we've got another one is the summer project awards. Those that's not even going to come out until in January, so they're during the beginning of the spring semester, and they'll be due a little bit later in February, and then we'll make those announcements on March 24th, and then that'll be for the summer, and that's the entire summer. In that case, there are other project type awards we'll have, and I'll talk about these here in a second. We have mentoring awards, which is something that a mentor can apply for, but can hire an undergraduate student or more to work on a project. We have community engaged learning awards, which I'll talk about here in a second. And then we have these ITEs, the Innovative Technology and Education Awards, which I'll talk about here as well. So again, these are the primary awards that most of our students apply for: travel awards and project awards. And in case of a project award, you might be wondering, like, what can I spend that money on? And it can be a couple things. You can use it to pay yourself a stipend. So you can pay yourself an hourly rate. A typical rate for a student is anywhere from, say, $12 to $16 an hour, roughly. During the academic year, fall or spring semester, you can pay yourself up to 20 hours a week. During the summer session, you can pay yourself up to 40 hours a week. So you can be full-time over the summer. You can pay for some tuition as well. So the tuition, as long as it's in a course related to your project. So as an example, if you needed to pay for 3 credits of calculus, we're not going to cover that unless you're working on a calculus project. So it's got to be some type of a research-related project or creative scholarship type of a project or course that you're taking that would be relevant. It can provide some travel funds related to the research itself. So if you have to do some field work, you need to go somewhere to get something, it'll cover those costs. And then it'll pay for any supplies. And that's another area where there's most of the funding. I would say most of the funding for a student project award goes towards stipend and then project supplies, like whatever you might need. And that's highly variable depending on the project. And this is where, sometimes, again, talking to your mentor or working with your mentor on developing the proposal, which I'll talk about here in a bit, is pretty handy. but also, as Aaron mentioned a bit ago, going to the URSA office and looking at previously funded URSA projects and looking at those proposals and getting a sense for what they covered in the past can be really helpful as you're developing, especially the first time. And so again, this award schedule is on our website. You can go take a look at it. These dates are pretty fixed. We don't have a lot of wiggle room there. The due date for any proposal is always Sunday at midnight. So if you're late, I wouldn't wait till the last minute. We tend to see a lot of proposals come in on the weekend before, or the Sunday that they're due. I wouldn't necessarily rely on that as a practice. I always encourage students to get them in early. It doesn't give you an advantage to get them in early, but what I have noticed is that a lot of times proposals that come in very last minute are often lacking some details that they need. And they're kind of rushed in a lot of ways. And so if you kind of, take the time to put together a proposal, work with your mentor, give him or her some opportunities to give you some feedback and make revisions to it, you're going to have a much stronger proposal than one that you're basically submitting, maybe minutes before the deadline. And I'll talk more about the proposals here in a second. But any questions sort of broadly on student awards or how funding can be utilized? Okay.
Is this done in the form of reimbursement?
No. So basically the way the money works is the stipend piece gets put into your student account. So you get paid that way. And then anything else, like anything like the tuition gets put in your student account as well. But the travel funds and the supply funds go to your department, and they sit in an account there. So as you're spending, like buying the supplies and working with your mentor to do that, or paying for any travel, you're not out of pocket doing anything and then having to get reimbursed. You're actually spending out of this account directly. So there's nothing out of pocket for you here.
Hey, Trent, would you be able to talk a little bit about how URSA funding kind of interacts with other types of funding on campus, like with BLAST or INBRE?
Sure. Yeah, so there are other funding opportunities on campus for undergraduate research or creative scholarship. As Aaron just mentioned, there's the BLAST program, which is the biomedical initiative here. So if you're interested in the biomedical field, there's a lot of opportunities that they have for funding. INBRE is a little bit different, but it's another undergraduate research funding opportunity. You can apply to any of them at any point in time, that when their various calls for proposals are, as well as URSA funding. The one thing that we do is that we communicate, those three different groups all communicate together, because what can't happen is the student can't be double funded. So if you can submit the same proposal to all three of those potentially, depending on what the priorities might be. But if you got funded, say all three of those entities said, we're going to fund you, you can't receive triple funding. It just doesn't, you just can't do that. So that's where we, again, was Aaron communicating with the BLAST folks and the INBRE folks. We then decide, okay, which projects are we going to fund? Which ones are you going to fund? So that each student gets only one pot of money to fund their research. And sometimes we give them the opportunity to decide which one they'd want to accept, for URSA versus BLAST, for example. Or we might just ask the BLAST office, are you going to fund these students? And they'll say yes or no. If we were going to fund those and they say yes, then we'll let them fund them. If we were going to fund them and they say no, then we'll fund them. But this so you're aware that you can't, because it comes up, the question comes up from students all the time, like, can I receive money from BLAST and URSA? If they're two different projects, yes, but if they're the same project, no. You can only get one pot of money from one of those two entities for a particular project. Okay, I will move on. I mentioned a couple of other types of awards, mentor awards. This isn't something that you as an undergraduate would apply for. This is something that a mentor would apply for. So we just had that call for proposals open up. And we're actually, and it's closed now, so we're in the review process. But basically, any mentor, again, it can be a faculty member, staff member, postdoc, graduate student at UAF that wants to develop a project idea in support of undergraduate research and creative scholarship. They can submit a proposal. Has to have usually one minimum, has to be one minimum, but usually two or more undergraduates involved in the project. And then they're providing support for that student, again, in the form of again, it's a stipend, it can cover tuition, it can cover any project costs, travel, the same exact types of things. The one sort of difference here is I mentioned the student project awards are for the fall, spring, or summer. So they have to be completed within that time frame, right? Fall semester, spring semester, or summer session. A mentor award is a little bit longer duration than that. So they typically get awarded in sort of mid fall semester. And by the time we get them set up, it's sort of later, about 2/3 of the way through the fall semester. But it's for the remainder of the fall semester, the entire spring session, and the first half of the summer up to the 30th of June. So it's a little bit longer duration project. And usually the scope of these projects is a little bit larger as well. But it's one of those things that as a student, you wouldn't develop a proposal for this, but you might be contacted by a mentor, or you might be contacted by an instructor, or might be contacted by your advisor. And they say, hey, I've gotten some funding from URSA through a mentor award. I'm interested in developing this project or having this proposal that's been funded on this project. Would you be interested in being involved in this project? And so you might be contacted by, again, your instructor and an advisor. It might be something that we see posted on our website or in an email that we send out. We're looking for students for these types of opportunities. So this is something to be aware of, because it's an opportunity that might sort of fall into your lap. And this is where I tell students, because I've done this on more than one occasion, this is where sort of, being a good student in a classroom can make a big difference. I've had students that, some of the better students in my class that are doing a great job and really engaged and excelling. I have gotten funding for projects and then approached them and said, hey, you're doing a great job in this class. I've got a project in this area that's similar to that. Would you be interested in doing this research or be involved in this project in some way? And so it's a great opportunity. So there's something to be aware of, that you don't always have to be the one seeking the funding. Sometimes the funding will seek you. And it's an opportunity that you might have to get involved in a project along the way. And then maybe that actually leads to the development of your, once that mentor award is completed, development of a sort of a next step where you can develop a project of your own based on that. So this is something to be aware of. So there's mentor awards. We have what are called community engaged learning awards. That RFP is going to be opening up here soon. Again, any student, faculty, or staff member can apply for these. You have to work with a community partner and explore some type of a community need. So these are often, in many cases, they can take a number of different forms, but usually the key thing is work with a community partner. So it might be working with the food bank, or might be working with the Red Cross or some other community-based organization. You still have to have a mentor here on the UAF campus. So usually is a faculty member or a staff member, but they might employ a number of students. There's not a lot of money involved in these projects. They're $500 a piece, but it's one of those opportunities that I think, we've only get a couple of those a year. I think there's a greater opportunity for having more of these types of projects that we fund, and so it's one of those I encourage students to consider if they're so inclined. So that's just another opportunity that's there. And then one that'll pop up in the spring is what's called an ITE award, or an Innovative Technology and Education Award. So in case you were ever wondering where some of your fees go to, it goes back to this pot of money. And so what we can provide in this case, or what we provide, is awards up to $5,000. Anybody on this campus can apply for it. It can be a faculty member, can be a staff member, can be a grad student, can be an undergraduate. And it's for the purchase of some piece of technology. It might be software, it might be some piece of equipment that can be used for education and or research. So it might be something tied to a project you're working on or something you're doing for a class. But I encourage students to apply for these as well. This is one of our more popular ones because it's a bit bigger chunk of money. But this is an RFP you'll see pop open in the spring semester, and it can be used in support of something you're doing here. So we have a number of these opportunities that are available at various times over the course of a year that you can take advantage of. And just to kind of give you some sense of the amount of money that we're allocating per year, this is for last academic year. So that'd be fall semester 21, spring semester 22, and then summer session 22. We gave out a total of 21 student project awards. Again, that's fall, spring, summer, for a total of almost $73,000. 9 mentor awards for just over $50,000. 2 of those community engaged learning awards for $1,000. and then 19 of the ITEs were just over $79,000. And to be quite honest, we had more money than that available. That we just didn't have, because of the pandemic. We haven't had as many students applying for URSA projects. And that's something I'm hoping to see change for this next academic year. Now that we're sort of getting out of the pandemic, we typically have between, again, depending on the academic year, we give out between roughly about $250,000 to about $360,000 in support of undergraduate research, which is a substantial commitment by the university to do that. And I'd be more than happy to give out all of that money every single year. We just haven't had the demand for it. So I'm challenging all of you that are here today to take advantage of that opportunity, because we want to fund your research and creative scholarship. So we have the resources to do it. So take advantage of it, because like I said, I've been at other universities. I've never seen this level of commitment in support of undergraduate research. And so it's definitely one of the things that makes UAF a pretty unique place in that regard. Questions on funding at all? And there's a lot more details on our website. In addition to something on our website that I'll point out that you might want to take a look at, there's a drop-down menu that gives a listing of all the different projects we've funded over the years. So it shows the student and the project that they received. And so you can go and take a look at those. Like, okay, if you want to look at the fall 21 projects that were funded, you can get a sense for what those were. And where the most interesting, I think, probably to most students, is that if you look in your area of your discipline, your area of interest, you can see like all the different projects that have been funded in that area. And might give you some ideas for a project, or give you some ideas for like what you can think about in terms of including. And like I mentioned, and like Aaron mentioned, you can pop by the URSA office, which is in 301 Bunnell building, and take a look at those proposals that have been funded. So you can get a sense for what a funded proposal looks like, what you need to include in that, which I'll talk about here in a moment. But it's always kind of nice to kind of ground that with looking at what a successful proposal looks like. Aaron?
Yeah, so we had a question about what happens to equipment purchased for a project that is no longer pursued. So I'm thinking that's applying to the supplies funding, if they purchase equipment or supplies.
Yep.
Or
so
their project, what happens after?
Any equipment or supplies that are purchased belong to the university, and so they actually technically belong to your department. So your department sort of takes ownership of them once the project is completed. So that's where they end up. Additional questions? All right. Well, let's move on. A couple other things I'll just point out before we get to the proposals. In case I mentioned, one of the things that an URSA project can cover is tuition. And so we have a couple of research-based courses that you may consider if your program doesn't offer something already related to that. So we have URSA 388, which is a proposal development course. Most commonly, students take URSA 488, which is a research course. You can take up to 6 credits of research. And so you can, if you're, say, for example, you've got an URSA funded project and you need some credits, and maybe it counts for a capstone requirement, or maybe it can fulfill some other requirement within your program. You can enroll for URSA 488 for anywhere from as few as 1 to as many as 6 credits for that particular semester, and complete the project during that time period. We'll cover that tuition as part of your project. If you're interested in working in a museum, so if maybe you have aspirations to become a curator at some point in time, we have what are called MRAP, which is the Museum Apprenticeship Program courses. There's a 288 and a 488. And again, we can help pair you up with a museum curator. And there's a couple of different folks that are working on various aspects at the museum, ranging from mammals and birds and aquatic organisms to art and a whole number of different things. And so paleontology, there's a lot of opportunities there if you're so inclined. And so there's another opportunity to get some credits in a research and or creative scholarship type of a project. And then the other thing I'll mention is what's called RCA Day, or Research and Creative Activity Day. If you receive URSA funding, you're required to participate in RCA Day. So it's an event we have in the spring. It's usually the first week of April. It's a celebration of undergraduate research and creative scholarship at UAF. And it's an opportunity for you to present your your work to your colleagues, your faculty members, the staff at this university. It's a big event. Pre-pandemic, we always held this as an in-person event at the Wood Center. We would have well over 100 participants in this. It was a big deal. During the 2 years, well, in 2020, we had to cancel the event because the pandemic had just happened and we weren't able to sort of pivot quick enough. But in 2021 and 2022, we had virtual events. And while those were great, they didn't have the level of involvement as we had in the past in the in-person event. The plan is for 2023, so April 2023, when we have our next Research and Creative Activity Day, it is back to an in-person event. So if you receive funding, you have to participate. But any undergraduate, even if you're not supported by URSA, you can be a part of this. And we encourage students, all undergraduate researchers and students involved in a creative scholarship project to be involved in this. And even if you have nothing to present, I would encourage you to attend. It's a great opportunity to see what other students are doing, students in your discipline, what they're doing, talk to them about their project, hear about their experiences. And it's just a great, I think, community event to hear about undergraduate research and celebrate those types of things. There are some awards that go along with those. We have a Dean's Choice Award. So every college and or school gives out at least one Dean's Choice Award and usually an honorable mention or two. And then there's an overall award that goes along with that as well. So that's an event that's coming up in April. There'll be more details on this a little bit later as we work through getting prepared for that. But you'll hear more about that probably starting in January of 2023. Okay, the last couple of things I want to talk about here with the remaining time we have left is the proposal process. So you've got an idea, you've got a mentor, you want to get a funded project, you want to apply for URSA funding. So this is where the proposal comes in. I'm going to talk about what are the components of the proposal that you have to develop and write, how the review process works, and then some tips that you'll know that other people who didn't participate in this session today won't know that can make a difference in getting funding or not. So if you go to our website, you'll see all this there. The things you have to write for a proposal are there's 2 pages worth here that I'm going to go through. First off, you have to come up with a project title. Yeah, something catchy is always great, but just something, that kind of describes what it is you're going to do. You do have to provide a short description, and we have word limits on these, so you can't exceed those. But your description is sort of a broad overview of your project in less than 50 words. We use that information when we're promoting your project. So we're going to use that. If you get a funded project, we're going to put that on our webpage. It's going to be a description that goes along with your title and your picture and your name, so that we have some information about your project that somebody could be scrolling through and seeing like, oh, here's a project on, it might be in biochemistry, and here's a short little description about what that project entails. We have an abstract. So again, a much broader overview, this up to 200 words. That's the max you can have there, that again describes what your project is about, what your objectives or goals might be. It might describe a little bit about what you're going to do, maybe some of your anticipated results that you're expecting to find. There's the next section, which is capped at 300 words, is the background and significance. So what is the justification for your project? Why is this important? What is the background, the current state of knowledge regarding a project? And granted, this is 300 words, so it's a paragraph. It's not long. This isn't. We're not expecting an exhaustive literature review here. It's just to kind of set some context for your project. Why is it important? What do we know currently about this topic? Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's quite a bit. You have to summarize that. But it's it's an area that I see sometimes get scrimped on by students, and it's worth putting a little bit of time into setting the context for your project. Because keep in mind that, and I'll talk about this in a second, your reviewers that are the faculty that are reviewing your proposal may not know anything about the topic you're working on. And so by having that context and that background helps set that, so they do understand why is this project important? What is the significance of it? The next area is the goals, objectives, and hypotheses. Again, capped at 200 words. Every project has a goal. What is the outcome you're trying to get to? Every project has an objective, or maybe 2 objectives. You may or may not have testable hypotheses. Those are sort of a more of a science-based project typically. But you may have hypotheses depending on what it is you're trying to do. But it's something that's worth developing. And what is the goal? What are you trying to accomplish? And what are the more specific objectives that you might have related to your project? The next section is the design and methodology. What are you going to do? And we're capping that at 300 words, which isn't usually enough, but we don't want pages and pages and pages of what you're going to do. We don't want that level of detail, but we do want a summarization of what it is you're going to do. So we can look and say, okay, here's the students, here's this, the project the student wants to conduct, here's their goals and objectives, and here's how they're going to accomplish those goals and objectives. So provide as much detail as you can, again, within that 300-word context, and be specific about what it is you're trying to accomplish for your project. The next section are the anticipated outcomes. So what do you expect to happen? What if you conduct this project, and whether it's a research focused project or it's more of a creative scholarship type of a project, what do you think is going to come out of it in the end? What type of results do you anticipate collecting? What type of information are you going to collect? What type of outcome do you think is going to occur as a result of what you're doing? Again, capped at 300 words. And you may not know exactly, but you'll hopefully you've given a little bit of thought to what you think the outcome is going to be. And then the next section, I think, in my opinion, is the most critical section of all. And this is the one that if I'm being totally honest, is often a make or break for almost every single proposal. And that's the mentor plan. It's capped at 200 words. So how are you going to work with your mentor on this project? What are the timelines you're going to be meeting from the start of your project to the very end? How frequently are you going to meet with your mentor? What are you going to talk about? Are you meeting weekly? Are you meeting every other week? Are you have designated sessions? It's going to be more open-ended. What are the different milestones along the way? I see in a lot of projects that don't get funded the first time often are lacking in this area. So spend some time there. Talk to your mentor about a plan, like what works for you as far as meetings. Is meeting once a week that going to work, or every other week, or what type of a schedule would you like to have, and then what would you like to talk about during those sessions so that it's laid out very clearly. So I would recommend always using up to the maximum words, 200 words on this one, to make sure you explain this fully. And then the last section is the budget and justification. What is your budget going to be? You're capped at the amount you can spend. How are you going to spend that money? Again, on yourself as a stipend. That might be covering some tuition. It might be covering project travel. It might be covering other supply costs. What exactly, detailing that out so that we know how much to spend. I would say as a recommendation, don't feel like that if you can't spend the full amount that you potentially could get. Don't feel like you can, if you don't do that, it's going to give you a leg up. It doesn't matter. We're not looking at that level of detail. I would always recommend spending the maximum amount you can possibly spend on a project, as long as you can use that money fully, and then providing the justification why you need to spend that amount of money is kind of a critical aspect as well. So you'll need to address all of those different aspects, and that's where, again, working with your mentor is critical. Giving him or her the opportunity at least one time to take a look through your proposal, to give you any feedback that's necessary. You making revisions, maybe you need to send them back to them again. And that's why I said earlier, don't wait till the last minute to work in your proposal and submit it. Work with your mentor, spend the time from when the RFP first comes out until the proposal actually due. Spend that time developing it, and in the long run, the payoff will be a higher probability of being funded as a result. So once you submitted your proposal, the next step that happens, so we receive anywhere from, depends on the RFP. Sometimes we get a lot, sometimes we don't, but usually typically anywhere from 25, maybe a few less than that, 20 to the most we've ever gotten for a request for proposals is 70. So it can be as many as that. That doesn't happen very often. So it's competitive. We're not going to fund all of them. We can't do that. We don't have that much money. Typically, we're funding anywhere from about 8 to 12, plus or minus a couple, might be one plus or minus 1 or 2. Maybe we fund a little bit less than that. Maybe we fund a few more than that, depending on the proposals and their quality. But the point is here, it's a competitive process. We're not going to fund everybody. And so submitting a proposal and putting the time into it to make sure it's well developed is pretty key. And I'll come back to something here in a little bit on that. But once the proposals have been received, we will go through them and make sure all the different components are addressed and do a little bit of quality control on those. And then we send them out to the URSA review board. The URSA review board are faculty at UAF. Each proposal gets 4 faculty reviewers. And typically the way we do that is that you're not going to get reviewers in your area of expertise necessarily. Typically, you're going to get 2 reviewers that are STEM based and 2 reviewers that are liberal arts based. And so you get a sort of a mix of reviewers, regardless of whether you're in a STEM field or in a liberal arts field. And so the faculty reviewers represent all of the different disciplines on this campus. So one of the things I'll talk about here in a minute that's really critical is writing a proposal for a general audience, not for a discipline specific audience, because if you're using a lot of jargon and terminology that people don't understand, the reviewers don't understand because they don't have that background, that's not going to serve you well. It's probably going to result in you not getting a good score. And the probability of not getting funded is much greater. So something to keep in mind. I'll talk about that here in a second. So the reviewers read your proposal. We give them a scoring rubric. They score your proposal. The way the scores work is kind of like golf. Low score wins. And they also provide you some written feedback on your proposals. And then they send them back to the URSA office. Aaron compiles all that information, puts it into a spreadsheet. We tally up the scores, and then it gives us rankings. And so we're just looking at the ranks of the students that submitted their proposals. And we just kind of work our way down the list sequentially until we run out of money allocated for that particular project award. And then we're not going to fund any more projects after that point in time. And so, again, the goal here is to be at the top of the list. If you have a high ranked proposal, something that scores low, so that your probability of getting funded is going to be much greater. Just some thoughts and tips I always tell all students. One of those is to make sure that you have addressed all of the proposal components thoroughly. You can't exceed the word limits for each of those different categories, but certainly use up to that point in time. What I see is in a lot of cases, student proposals that don't get funded are often come across as being rushed, like they might have waited until the last weekend to do it. They're not well developed. There's, for a section that might be, a 300 word, what would be a typical paragraph, it might be 1 or 2 sentences. They're just lacking the detail necessary to be competitive. And so if you in those cases, you might get a high score in that category. 1 or 2 high scores on that rubric are enough to sort of knock a proposal out of contention to be funded. And so spend time on the proposal and working with your mentor on that. Go to our website, and here's the specific link to review the evaluation criteria that we're looking for. Again, making sure that you have checked all those boxes and nothing's missing so that you get the lowest score possible. I mentioned the reviewers are going to have a pretty mixed background across all disciplines at the UAF campus. And so you want to write for a general audience. You want to write for an audience that it doesn't matter if they have that, if they know that discipline or don't, they're going to understand your proposal. I tell all students the same thing. Write your proposal like you're talking to your parents, assuming your parents don't have, if you're writing a fisheries project, your parents aren't a fish biologist, but, make sure you can explain this without using a lot of terminology. If you have to use terminology, that's fine. Just explain it, just define it, describe it, whatever it might be. But you want to make sure that you don't lose your reviewers. And I've seen that in very technical proposals where the reviewers don't have that expertise tend to score high and therefore not get funded. And then the last thing I'll say is be persistent. So if you don't get funded, and or maybe funding a quarter of the proposals are getting submitted, there's a good chance that your first iteration you're not going to get funded. And don't get discouraged by that and just say, well, I guess I can't do undergraduate research. I'm not cut out for that. Take a different tack on that. Take the proposal and the feedback we give you, because you're going to get feedback from the reviewers, talk to your mentor, come and talk to us, come see me, go see Aaron, revise your proposal, and then resubmit it the next time. I guarantee you this, I've seen it too many times, that students that resubmit their proposals using the feedback they've received and working with their mentors and or URSA staff, the probability of being funded the next time around is substantially greater. So again, don't wait till your last semester as a student at EOAF to apply for URSA funding. Do it much sooner than that. Recognize that you might not get funded the first time around. Yes, it's disappointing. We've all been there. I've gotten rejected before. But don't just take that as a well, I can't do it and move on. Make the revisions necessary, apply again, and work with us and your mentor, and I think sooner or later you're gonna get a hit on this, and you're gonna get a funded project. So I would encourage that. That concludes everything I wanted to say with just a few minutes to spare. There's a couple of other pieces of information here. Here's our website. So there's a wealth of more information on our website. I just kind of hit the high points here, but definitely take a look at that. Here's my contact information. I'm up on Westbridge. I'm in the Arctic Health Research Building. So I'm up the hill a little ways, but you can come by my office, or you can shoot me an email, give me a call, we can chat. And then Erin, who's the URSA coordinator, here's her email and phone number, and she's down at the URSA office, which is in 301 Bunnell. So in the Bunnell building. So feel free to stop by or set up an appointment to see her.